Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Until recently, the global economy was forecast to grow at a very brisk pace, not seen in more than a decade in the pre COVID period. Across developed countries, unemployment has been falling, and job vacancies have been at or near record highs. All these features of a recovering, healthy global labor market are certainly good reasons for cheer, especially since they provide a little bit of a cushion to absorb all the looming geopolitical risks, the supply chain issues, and the expected slowdown in economic growth. But these conditions also make it very difficult for businesses to hire the people they need and to plan a strategy for building a sustainable, diverse workforce for the future. So, as a business, how do you navigate this uncertainty? And can embedding flexible work arrangements in your people strategy help you attract talent as these different economic scenarios unfold? I am an economist and head of research for Europe, Middle East, and Africa at Indeed. Indeed is the world's largest job site, and our business of matching people with jobs really gives us a front row seat into the behavior of job seekers around the world and into the millions of jobs that employers post all over the world each month. In the Indeed Hiring Lab, which is our research unit, we study these patterns and we publish research to help businesses understand the competition that they face in the labor market, what kinds of jobs people are looking for, and what people want from their work lives. And unlike surveys, which tell us what people say, these data also tell us what people actually do. For instance, when they search for a job in the privacy of their homes or on their phones. And all that big data tells us, in my opinion, that businesses should be offering flexibility to as many employees as they can in this environment that is currently both highly competitive and highly uncertain. And there are three main reasons why businesses should offer flexibility. Number one, your competitors are doing it and they'll keep doing it. Number two, people want it. And number three, it's a way to tap into the underutilized talent pools and create a more diverse workforce. So in today's presentation, I will show you data on all this to really try to go beyond anecdote and beyond the experiences of individual companies to build a more comprehensive picture of flexibility in today's post-COVID recovering labor market. Let me start by briefly setting out the broader labor market context. And the context is basically that it's a candidates market, even though the economic outlook is quite uncertain right now. This slide shows the change in online job postings on Indeed relative to February 2020, which is our pre-pandemic baseline, in the G7 countries, which are among the world's largest economies. The blue dots on the slide represent data as of the 4th of March this year, and the pink dots represent the pandemic lows. Clearly, when the pandemic hit, job postings and hiring fell significantly. But since then, there's been a huge rebound in demand from employers for staff across virtually all sectors of the economy and around the world. And in the countries that I'm showing you here, the number of job postings is between 1/3 and 2/3 higher today than it was before the pandemic. So the takeaway is there is a lot of competition for talent and very little margin for error. And it's more important than ever for employers to focus on what employees and candidates want to be able to attract and retain talent. So what are businesses actually doing as they grapple with talent attraction and retention in this environment? Well, they're doing different things. So our data from job postings show that they're raising pay, at least in some countries and in some sectors. They're investing in the employee experience, and they're boosting benefits and perks. But one of the biggest trends that we see in what employers advertise in job postings is the rise in the offers of flexibility. And one example of flexibility is remote working. This slide shows a chart from our recent joint work with the OECD on remote work in a number of countries. And it shows that the share of job postings that advertise remote or hybrid working options has more than tripled since the pandemic began. That's the blue line. Of course, much of the initial boost to advertised remote work happened as public health restrictions tightened in response to COVID in the early stages of the pandemic, and that's the orange line, the restrictions. But what's really interesting is that when you look at the right-hand side of the chart, remote work is persisting well above pre-pandemic levels, even as restrictions have eased. And this is data through the end of February 2022. It's a pattern that we see across countries, and to me, this real-time data is one of the most convincing pieces of evidence outside surveys that remote work is here to stay. Because what employers put in job ads represents a forward-looking commitment to what the job will look like in the future. But to know whether offering flexibility is a good strategy, it's important for employers not just to look at what the competition are doing, but also to know what candidates are actually looking for. And there are at least 3 ways to find out what people want from work. The first is to just ask them. And certainly the consensus from many large-scale surveys has been that the vast majority of office workers around the world do want to keep the option open to work remotely in the future, at least part of the week, and certainly at much higher levels than before the pandemic. So that's what people say in the surveys. The second way to find out what people want is to see what they say in company reviews. Indeed's sister company Glassdoor has actually recently trawled through hundreds of thousands of company reviews that employees leave online in the UK, and they found that one of the fastest growing words that people used in reviews between 2020 and 2021 was hybrid. And this has led them to choose hybrid as their word of the year. They actually found, when drilling into the context of these reviews, that reviews tended to praise hybrid work schedules. And even when hybrid work was mentioned in the cons or negative sections of reviews, people tended to denounce the lack of hybrid working rather than complain about the existence of hybrid working. So employee reviews are a second way to find out what people say they want from work, and that's something all businesses should keep in mind. The third way to find out what people want is to look at what they actually do when they're searching for jobs online. And when we do that, we also find that consistently across the world, the fastest rising keywords in job search have been those related to remote work, including hybrid work. In the US, for example, there's been a 3-fold increase in the share of job searches that mention such keywords since before the pandemic. And in the UK, there's been a 10-fold increase, mainly because the starting point was lower. And in virtually all developed countries, there's been a rise in that sort of range. This is not necessarily driven by changes in the composition of job seekers. So in other words, it's not because there are more office workers searching for jobs online today than before the pandemic. It's genuinely a broad increase in interest in remote work opportunities. And in fact, in the UK, job seeker interest in remote work is higher now than during any of the lockdowns last year or the year before. So these trends really show to me that remote and hybrid working are increasingly top of mind for candidates. And I think this is crucial data for businesses who want to attract talent in the post-pandemic world. Now, for all the talk of the remote working revolution, and which is a big theme of this conference, it's obvious that not everyone in the economy can work remotely. Lots of jobs involve making and moving things or dealing with customers or patients in person, and little to none of that can actually be done from home. Just to put some numbers around this, some economists have estimated that around 2/3 of all US jobs cannot be done remotely. And we see that in the data. The left-hand side of this slide shows the job categories that people tend to browse after searching for jobs using keywords related to remote or hybrid work. And these jobs tend to be the white-collar office-type jobs in industries like tech or professional services where working from home is actually feasible. But what's interesting is the right-hand side shows that people who search using more general keywords related to flexibility, other than remote or hybrid work, end up expressing interest in a very wide variety of job categories, from social care to marketing, hospitality, education, or sports. And the conclusion is that there is scope for offering people flexibility in jobs across the entire spectrum of the workforce, and it's not just something that should be limited to office workers. Of course, with the caveat that flexibility will mean different things in different industries, from the capability to work from home in tech or professional services to, for instance, the ability to tailor shifts in the hospitality industry. And thinking about different forms of flexibility also opens the door to thinking about different candidate pools. Despite the fact that unemployment is low across the developed world, there are still certain demographic groups that face very high unemployment rates, even in the rich countries. This chart shows an example from the UK, where overall unemployment is just 4%, which is only slightly higher than its long-time low. But the unemployment rate is unfortunately much, much higher for single parents, for ethnic minorities, for young people, and for people with disabilities, to name a few. These patterns are actually similar around the world. People with these characteristics do, on average, find it harder to get a job, even once they start looking. And in part, it's really because they have different needs than the average worker. So, for example, people with certain disabilities will find it harder to travel to workplaces. And research has also found that mothers have a lower willingness to commute than fathers. And that's something that really restricts the universe of available jobs for them and makes it harder to get good matches between people and jobs. Flexibility, I think, can be a way to overcome many of these challenges by offering options like working from home part of the week to avoid a lengthy commute, or maybe setting a working schedule that's different than 9 to 5 to fit in family responsibilities or even personal preferences. It's true that a lot of this may be costly for businesses. Management practices need to change to accommodate people working different schedules. And hiring some of these candidates may be costly as well. So, for instance, young people need training and they're more likely to leave, which does impose a cost. But I think that businesses who want a diverse and sustainable workforce in the long term should think about these types of candidates and offering them the types of flexibility that work for them. So in conclusion, 3 reasons why you want to offer flexibility. 1, your competitors are doing it. 2, people want it. And 3, it creates a more diverse workforce. But how do you start going about embedding flexibility into your people strategy if you haven't already done it or if you have struggled to do it in the past? Well, number 1, try to understand your target talent pool to be able to adapt the nature of jobs to the changing expectations of candidates. Number 2, search broadly and really invest in training and flexibility despite the cost that that may have. And number 3, recognize that flexibility can really come in different guises besides remote working, and choose the type of flexibility that fits the needs of your organization and the needs of your workforce. It's been a pleasure speaking to such a diverse audience in this short period of time. I look forward to receiving your questions and comments through the conference platform. And for the minority of you who will be in London for the in-person part of the conference tomorrow, I look forward to meeting you there. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the event.